Have you ever gotten lost in a big city like New York, London, Paris, and you might have asked for directions and someone says go 2 blocks north and 3 blocks east or west or something like that? Well, without a proper starting point, sometimes that cannot take you to where you need to go. Now, that's kind of like Excel. Excel is a big city full of grids, uh, addresses where cells contain stuff. So we need to find those addresses. So with those random directions of north and south, we refer to them as relative addresses. So they're relative to where you are. So we'll be looking at this in some detail in a moment, but there's also an absolute address. Now, an absolute address is much like just say 20 West 34th Street, something like that. So that is an absolute address. You will find that because it is a known location. So the same thing applies in a spreadsheet because Excel is massive. There's millions of cells all throughout a single sheet. So knowing how to address your cells correctly and pointing to the right things, when you copy those cells, you want those addresses to play their part. So mastering the technique of relative and absolute cell addressing is super key to understanding how Excel works. So today we are actually going to start on a little field trip to New York just to have a little taste of what we're talking about, and we'll get into some nitty gritty stuff as we go on. So off we go to the Big Apple. Let's dive in, shall we? So this might seem an odd place to start talking about Excel, but wait till we see what we're able to demonstrate about particularly one aspect of cell addressing called relative cell addressing. So if you look particularly at the map of Manhattan, the streets are in the main in grid formats, so very much like a spreadsheet. So we're going to mark up a small part of this section of a map of Manhattan, lower Manhattan, where we are here with Madison Square Garden, Empire State Building. We're asking someone for directions. We've just popped out here at Penn Station and we want to get to the Empire State Building. I believe you can see it if you're here in front of Madison Square Garden in the plaza area. You can look across to the Empire State Building, but let's say we've popped out here and we're unsure which way to go, and we just need to know a quick way to get to the very famous Empire State Building. So, as I said, just popping out here in Penn Station, we're going to get instructions from a very kind person here to say you want to go 1, 2 major blocks to Fifth Avenue, and then 1, 2, and you won't be able to miss it. It's right there. So that's a cool thing. But if we were to have been located here on West 30th Street and applied the same directions, would we still get to the Empire State Building? Let's check it out. So we go 1, 2 blocks, then up Fifth Avenue, 1, 2 blocks, and we're nowhere near the Empire State Building. We could probably get some great Korean barbecue, hopefully. but it's not taking us to the same spot. So we're one block away. We don't get our absolute address, pardon the pun, the Empire State Building. We get somewhere else relative to where we started. So that will continue in an Excel spreadsheet to see what are the differences between relative and absolute cell addresses. So, to get to our destination of the Empire State Building, this time we're going to ask Google and see what happens when it gives us an absolute reference from point to point. So we're going to start from Penn Station and we're walking and we're going to the Empire State Building, and here are our choices. So across one, up one, and across two, and a short walk to the State Building, Empire State Building. So that is an absolute address being 20 West 34th Street. Now let's continue this inside a spreadsheet to look at relative and absolute addresses as they exist in Excel. Now we're in the spreadsheet. Let's look a bit closer at how this map analogy can apply to Excel. So let's quickly refresh. We had instructions to go 2 across, 2 up, and we get to our result that we wish to refer to, which was our end destination, the Empire State Building. Then we moved down and started the same instructions, 2 across, 2 up, but it doesn't take us to the Empire State Building. It takes us 1 block down. Now, this little set of numbers here is simply some plain numbers entered in this row in row 11, and then some formulas in row 12. Now, if I double click on these, you'll see that they're relatively referring to the cell above and to cell F9, which is 1, 2 across, 1, 2, 3 up. Now, if we look at our next cell, same formula, 1 above, but now it's 1 across, 1, 2, 3 up. Now, the last one, same thing, but it's just 1 up and then 1, 2, 3 up for the number that we're adding to the one above. Now, when we copy, this is when the application of relative versus absolute comes into play. So copying these formulas down to the row below here. So let's just do that now. So copy, Control C, or right click and copy, and then paste down below. Now, you'll see it was the same formula that's been copied. Now, just a quick glance, and you can see that each of these results are 10 less than the numbers above show in these formulas here. Why is that? Now, let's look at this first formula. The relative address was for F9, 1, 2 cells across, 1, 2, 3 cells up. What was copied? 1 cell above, but 1, 2 cells across, 1, 2, 3 cells above. Now that 3 cells above currently contains nothing. So 12 plus nothing equals 12. 23 plus nothing equals 23. 45 plus nothing equals 45. So we either need to enter something in that cell, like a 10 is above, and then it works, or we need to copy it smarter, because if we just wish to use that one cell as our input, not to have to place a 10 or whatever number we have, write down a spreadsheet, or create the formulas multiple times, that's not good either. So let's look at how we can copy that formula without having to place a 10 here or write each formula individually. So what do we do before we copy? We need to say that that cell is absolute, meaning when we copy down, it's always going to refer to the cell above, which is cell F9, which we are going to lock. How do we lock a cell reference to make it absolute? Just as we did in the example, the Empire State Building also has an address, an exact absolute address. How do we do that? Let's go to our formula here. D11 plus F9 works, but if we hit the F4 function key, you'll see the addition of these dollar signs. Now, if I continually hit, you'll see it goes from blank, i.e. unlocked, to $2, locking both column and row, to $1, locking the row, to $1, locking the column, back to none, unlocked. So let's lock it with F9 being the absolute address. Now, instead of when we copy, it's going to always look up above. So if we copy that address by just simply, or that formula by dragging it across, you'll see nothing changes because it's still going to work for us. Still referring to the same pattern as it was before. But now if we copy, this is a right click to paste. Let's have a look at what is in this cell. See, it's absolutely referring back to F9, as is this one, as is this one. So the effect of the dollar is to lock the column or row reference, or both, so that when you copy the formula that contains that absolute address, it just will not change when you copy it to a new location. So in essence, getting back to our example here, we could have said to go straight to the Empire State Building at its absolute street address in 33rd Street versus going up a certain number of blocks, which is the relative approach to that. Now, I hope that's made a little bit of sense, hopefully a lot of sense, and we'll come back in a moment and we'll look at another example. We're going to use both relative and absolute cell addressing in this example. This one's a very realistic one, I would assume, for some, that a group of friends have gone to a restaurant and they're trying to split up the bill, the check at the end of the night, trying to work out who owns what, and based on the total bill, which would include both tax and the tip. So starting off here, Sarah's had this amount here allocated based on the wines and whatnot that were consumed during the evening. So if we have a look at this first entry here under the tax column. So it is referring to this cell here, and this column is F, and it's on row 4. So we wish that to change because we're going to copy that down to the other friends. And it's also referring to G2, which is the area where the tax rate is stored, and we want that to be locked so that when we copy it down, the reference will always be back to that tax rate. Now, the same would apply for the tip. So this has a different rate up here, but it's H2 that we wish to lock or put the anchors on, if you like, and that will be then copied down to the other people's entries as well. Now, a relative address on its own will help us simply copy the totals for all of the meals, drinks, and the totals of those, and then ultimately the totals for each of the taxes so that we can work out the shares. All right, so let's firstly click on the auto sum, which is going to detect above that we have some numbers, and it will add them all up using the sum function. When I hit enter, that's the total of that range. Now we want those to be relative as we copy across because we wish to then add up every single column. So let's just use the drag option from the fill handle right across. Let's even go right to the end here. And at the moment, we don't have anything in here. We'll come back to that. And we've added up our 2 bunches of columns here to give us that total here. And now let's add the tax and the tips. So once again, in edit mode, we can modify very quickly using our function key F4, and luckily we're referring to F4 here, ha ha ha. And let's just either click here in the formula bar or in cell, either will work. Function F4 once to make it absolute. We'll do the whole cycle again. Second time, just the row number. Third time, just the letter for the column. Fourth time, back to relative and no dollar signs. But once more, we're going to make that an absolute address. Hit enter, control enter to stay, and let's copy that down to work out the taxes for everyone there. Oh, we've lost our formatting a bit, but not to worry, we'll sort that out. And then we have the tip. The same thing applies, clicking in, function F4 on the keyboard, enter, copy it down, and now we have all of that sorted. Let's dress this up before we carry on. Selecting the cells that you wish to copy the formatting of, click the Format Painter, click like so. Once again, let's try that. And now we've copied that formatting across to those 2. So let's clean that up a bit. All right, now the final thing is we need everyone's share of our total bill, which including the tip of $45. Yay, big night out. Let's add these all up. So if we click to equals to start our formula, and we're going to sum total all of these. So starting to type sum and tab in, select our range, which will be our total plus tax plus tip, and enter or control enter to stay there. And let's drag that down. Okay, so this is our total that we'll be paying. So if we exclude the tip, equals that less the tip, Okay, $248.60 was our old total before the tip, $22.60 for our tax. We're good to go. Now everyone knows what they're going to be up for in their share of our night out at Mason's restaurant. Now we're stepping it up a bit. This is a much more business-like kind of spreadsheet in front of us. We're addressing a forecast of wages, income from various investments, then how much will then be allocated to a bank account or accounts with the total of what's there at the moment, and that total as well, and the balance that would be above the 40% that's being reserved for the bank. So the formulas themselves, let's have a look. We've got firstly this one here, which is a sum total, which has been copied across. As you can see, that increases when these income streams come in. And that's all that does. And over the end here in the totals, it's the same, just summing above. Now, let's have a look what this one does. Right, so here's our pattern. So we've always got to keep an eye out for the pattern. If we are copying this across, we want that to remain as relative, but we would want to always refer to this 40%, which is in B20. So we've got dollar signs in front of both column and row, so that should be fine to copy across. So let's do that now, shall we? And we've done that pretty successfully. As you can see, just a quick check. They're all coming back to that 40%, but the pattern is two rows above, but always B20. Excellent. Now the next formula to tackle here is the total. It should be pretty straightforward. It's always going to be relative because we just want to add these two cells, 3 and 2 above. So let's go through that process. And that's all done. Excellent. And the final one is the balance income, which will be C18 minus C20. And that will be changeable for each month and total. So that's relative again. Filled out our table, job done, and we would then send that off for approval. This next example is totally different. What we have here is a report from a shipping agent about a particular vessel's visit to the port in Singapore and all the charges that go with that for a commercial freight ship. And over to the right-hand side is the area we're going to be concerned with regards our absolute and relative cell addressing. Now, let me draw your attention to a couple of things. We've got over here a little rate exchange table, and that's been produced from this area here under the data tab, the data types, where you can bring in some geography based upon countries or place names that you enter into the spreadsheet. You can bring in statistics around those, current stock and currency exchange information as well. So for our one that we have on the spreadsheet, the currency pairs, you can see are entered in that format. I've used the slash format, and that then brings in the rate as a choice, and also other information like I've got here, the last trade date, and so on. So that's a very cool feature. Of course, there is a disclaimer around any sort of quoting of prices and stocks and so on, that people are encouraged to make their own inquiries about that. But I've got that there as an example today. And if we have a look over here, we want to convert this information that we have here, which is in Singapore dollars. So there's our unit rates in Singapore dollars and the extrapolated amounts and total as well. And that rate can be converted using this table. So if we have a look at what we're referring to here, it's the unit rate multiplied by the conversion rate of Singapore to US dollars. And that has been referenced absolutely, with a dollar sign on the column and row number. And that allows us to then copy that down so that we don't lose that reference and have it copying in through the wrong currency pair. You can see the potential damage that could be concerned there when we've got all these different rates that we can see here at different amounts instead of the 0.77. We could be seriously under or over quoting the conversion. And then finally, this formula here is a simple conversion then of our converted rate multiplied by the quantity. And let's scroll over a little bit here. So each of these charges and descriptions that we have here are based and charged through a quantity, depending upon what it actually is. Those then have rates, and then so on. We scroll that out. So in essence, a shipping agent would handle all of this for us and send us this disbursement. We may have, and I think we have in this case, sent in advance so that we've at least covered some of the costs, and this disbursement would be telling us what the remainder would be, the balance, which, it gets quite pricey when you're talking about these large vessels. So this is the only one that we need to worry about with the absolute referencing. So once we drag that through the rest of the items, we will then have something to refer to here, which is then subtotaled there in US dollars. So whilst it might look like a complex spreadsheet, it is simply a list of fees with a quantity of things that have applied to these categories and the unit that we're talking in the quantities about that have a rate in Singapore dollars extrapolated to an amount in Singapore dollars that we're basically just converting for the owners of this vessel. So a nice little example of using an absolute reference, again, converting dollars in this case from Singapore dollars, US dollars from Singapore dollars, as opposed to other examples where we've used rates and so on. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that one. And we'll have another look at some more in a moment. And finally, we come to our discussion about mixed referencing. Now, these are probably the least that you would be using in terms of making a partial reference absolute, where you would make it either relative or fully absolute in the main. But when we're dealing with a table such as this, where we have a matrix of things, the column and the row references, we need to work out a calculation for each of those. So let's see what we've got in play at the moment. So it's a simple multiplication table, say for a school, and we're multiplying the first column cell by the first row cell. And we wish to carry that throughout the entire matrix, so that in the end we'll be multiplying 12 by 12. Now I've coloured it up, but each of these cells in the column and the row are the ones of interest. So row 4 and column B, if we have a look at our formula, row 4 and column B are the two parts that we need to lock to put the anchor on. So how do we do that? A couple of ways. As we've seen throughout this video, if we tap the F4 key, we cycle through all the possibilities until we get back to a relative address. Now, as I mentioned, column B and row 4 are the two parts that we need to lock. So let's go through the options until we see the one that we want. Now I've already gotten there. C $4 will lock row 4. And if we look at the other reference, we want to lock column B, so we move it until we see the $sign in front of the column B reference and row 5 at the moment. Now, I'll just escape out of that because let's see what happens if we don't make that change. So if we copy down and across, this is a simple multiplication table. First one works, 2 times 2. 2 times 3 does not equal 12. And then you can see that the problem just compounds. And what you see over here with these E plus things, that's just a really big number that's too big to be displayed in that cell because it's the result of a calculation. Then we have these num errors, and what they're telling us is there's a number error somewhere that we can't cope with, multiplying something by something huge, and it's just really gotten out of control. So that is a problem. So to make the issue go away, when we have a matrix such as this that we need to multiply number by number, and we need to do it in a very simple way. I mean, we could have created a formula for each of these cells, but that's inefficient. So let's make it efficient. So once again, let's put in our locks, our absolute mixed absolution of column B and row 4. So first off, row 4, then we go to lock column B and enter. And when we copy this through, I'm sure you'll see a huge difference. So let's have a look here at dragging it throughout the rest of the spreadsheet. And here we are at the very end. Let's have a look at this new focus cell option. So at the very end, we have 12 times 12. And if I remember correctly, 144 is correct. Let's do a spot check here. 5 times 8 equals 40. Correct. 3 times 9, 27. 2 times 11, 22. So our multiplication table is complete. Let's turn that one off again. All right. Our next example is very similar, and we'll just go through the steps that we need to complete this one. So we need to multiply the amount of the software license per user per year by the brackets of numbers of seats. Now we've got basically everything ready to go. Our two concerns are we need to lock column B again, but this time row 32. So our formula already reads correctly $32 multiplied by $B 33. Now let's copy that down and across. And that looks pretty correct in my book. So we've just saved a lot of time there. Instead of creating all of these 40 formulas, we only need to create one and copy. And just going back to our original example, the reason we need to concern ourselves with absolute cell references, either mixed or fully absolute, is because we wish to save time when we copy our formulas. I hope you've enjoyed this today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.